We know that a lot of times the national sports media lives in a sensationalistic world because that's where they feel the interest comes from, and that's ultimately where the money is to be made. It really mirrors the regular national, state run, corporate owned media in a lot of ways in that sense. With that said, we know that the media loves to stir up debates, sometimes that are legitimate, sometimes that aren't. One of those great areas of debate is we like to debate the present and future versus the past, who's the best, who was the greatest, and all of this. And I know that a lot of people don't like Bill Belichick because the Patriots have been good for a long time, and there's naturally a bit of a heel heat element that goes along with that. We're also talking about the hoodie wearing, rule breaking, media mumbling, kind of surly personality that all encompasses Bill Belichick on so many different levels. In many ways, in a lot of circles, he hasn't been the most endearing figure throughout his 4 decades of being an NFL coach at many different levels for different organizations. But I think now, as we're watching the 2016 season and we're seeing a guy without arguably the greatest quarterback of all time start off the season 3-0 with a couple of inexperienced quarterbacks starting, if it wasn't already determined, I think the start to this year for the Patriots only further validates that Bill Belichick is the greatest NFL coach of all time. Vince Lombardi will be a name that's thrown out there. Chuck Noll, Bill Walsh. People look at career wins and talk about Don Shula and George Halas. Well, George Halas had a lot of bad years as a Bears head coach too, along with a lot of past history going back to the 20s, 30s, and 40s when there weren't a lot of teams in the league. Period. Vince Lombardi, yes, he won his 5 championships in the 60s, but a much, much different era. Much different era where again you didn't have to worry about it. Similar with Chuck Noll and mostly Don Shula, Tom Landry, all of those names, Bill Walsh. They didn't have to worry about free agency. They didn't have to worry about salary caps. They didn't have to worry about these things. It's just a different place. You could get a team and keep a team together for a decade, and if you got it right, you were going to be good for a long time. That's not the environment and the reality that Bill Belichick lives in. His roster turns over every year. He has to worry about the salary cap. He has to worry about, do I hold on to this guy? Do I let him go? He has to find guys off the scrap heap. He has to find the unheralded guys and make them work. And nobody's been better at doing that for a longer time than Belichick. And in my estimation, whether we want to give the guy a credit or not, we must bow down to the king. He is the greatest coach of all time, and I think his resume speaks for itself. The greatest NFL coach of all time. And I'm not even sure that it's really, frankly, that close. And I mean no disrespect to anybody else, but it really isn't. Going back to his earlier formative years as an NFL coach, the first 2 decades plus. Talking about a guy that was a 2-time Super Bowl champion as a defensive coordinator under Bill Parcells with those great Giants defenses. They won Super Bowl 21, Super Bowl 25. Some of you will sit there and talk about, oh, they had Lawrence Taylor. How hard is it to have a great defense? Well, they still had a great defense, and they were good enough to win the Super Bowl multiple times. And part of that is the way that they utilized Lawrence Taylor, and a person that was primarily responsible for how Lawrence Taylor was utilized in the mid-late 80s and early 90s was Bill Belichick. And people point to his time in Cleveland as a head coach to talk about how it largely didn't go well. And frankly, yes, it largely didn't go well. Although in 1994, his team went 11-5. They made it to the playoffs. Ironically enough, they beat the Patriots in the wild card round of the playoffs. That's the last playoff win in the history of the Cleveland Browns organization. And the next year, he had to deal with the specter of what was going down with Art Modell and the city of Cleveland and the specter of new stadium deal, or is this team going to move somewhere else? That's a tough distraction to deal with. But he took his lumps, and a few years later, he got the right opportunity for him, and unfortunately for Jets fans, it ended up not being the Jets, even though it originally was the Jets. It was the New England Patriots, where Robert Kraft hired him to be the head coach. He said, shit, I'll give up a first-round pick to get this guy. Robert Kraft knew something and almost instantly turned over player personnel control to him, basically made him coach and general manager de facto in a lot of ways. And let's look at what's happened with Bill Belichick running the show over the past 16 years. as both the coach and in a lot of ways the general manager, even where sometimes the general manager has hindered the head coach, and the head coach, Bill Belichick, has saved the general manager, Bill Belichick's ass a lot of times. Let's look at this. Since 2000, 16 full seasons and now 3 games elapsed for the Patriots in the 2016 season. The Patriots have had 1 losing season in 16 years, and that was all the way back in 2002. Tom Brady's second kind of full year as a starter. 2002. 1 losing season out of 16. In 16 years, they've only missed the playoffs 3 times. 3 times. Just think about that. Just think about that. And even in that particular situation, you're talking about 2 of the 3 times that they missed, outside of the first year he was there in 2000, where I think they went 5-11. His team went 9-7 in 2002 and 11-5 in 2008 without Tom Brady. An 11-win team without their all-pro caliber Hall of Fame quarterback went 11-5. And in 2002 they went 9-7. So those 2 years out of the 3 that they missed the playoffs, 2 of them they still had a winning record. 13 seasons with 10-plus wins. 10 seasons with 12-plus wins, including a 13-win season in 2011, which resulted in a Super Bowl trip, mind you. 3 14-win seasons, including 2 of them that were Super Bowl championship seasons in 2003 and 2004. And the 16-0 team in 2007 coming off of the specter of Spygate. They made it all the way to the Super Bowl that year too, even though they didn't win it. Think about that. 13 seasons out of 16. This guy's team won 10-plus games. Only 3 years they failed to make the playoffs. That's insane. In today's environment, in today's NFL, sure, it's helped that he's had Tom Brady all of those years, because that's the building block of your team as the quarterback. And when you have arguably the greatest of all time, it most certainly doesn't hurt. But there's a lot more at play and a lot more factors to be able to say that this team could have this level of consistent success. I mean, my goodness. 13 times they've won their division. 13 times AFC East champions out of 16 seasons. 10 times they've made the AFC Championship game. Bill Belichick's record as a head coach in the playoffs during that time, 22-9. 22-9. That's crazy. He averages, with each playoff trip, 2 wins per playoff appearance. Who the hell does that? Bill Belichick does. His teams have won 6 AFC championships. So that, to translate it, means 6 times his team has played in the Super Bowl. And there were several other opportunities and chances where they potentially could have as well, with 10 AFC championship game appearances. That's nuts. You have entire divisions in the National Football League that can't sit there and say they have 10 AFC or NFC championship game appearances. And this guy right here, his team has 10 just during his 15-year period. 4 Super Bowl trophies and 2 other Super Bowls that they lost to Super Bowl-worthy all-time epic fluke catches. David Tyree in the catch in 2007. And oftentimes another spectacular catch that's forgotten about in 2011 season was Mario Manningham in that 38-yarder down the left sideline in the 4th quarter. I mean, who the fuck are David Tyree and Mario Manningham? If it's not for those 2 flukish kind of once-in-a-lifetime plays by those mediocre players, we could be talking about Bill Belichick having 6 Super Bowl championships. And then there would absolutely be no debate. And even with the 2 Super Bowl losses, I still don't think there's any debate, because in this environment, in this culture, in this day and time, he's been able to make it to the Super Bowl 6 times and won 4 of them. His career winning percentage in New England is .730. Over 7 out of every 10 football games that he coaches this team, they win. I mean, that is a fucking resume. If you said a guy's been with an organization 10 years, made the playoffs 6 times, maybe made 1 Super Bowl appearance and lost, that's a pretty good coaching resume. Maybe a guy gets 12 years, makes the playoffs 8 times, makes it to a couple of conference championship games, wins a Super Bowl. That could arguably be a Hall of Fame career. But Bill Belichick has taken his team to 10 AFC Championship games, 6 Super Bowls, and won 4 of them with a .730 winning percentage, a 22-9 career playoff record, 13 seasons with 10-plus wins. 10 of those where there's 12 or more wins. So out of his 16 years at the helm, full seasons at the helm of the New England Patriots, 10 of those years, they have won 3/4 of their games or more, including the only team in NFL history to go 16-0 in the regular season. That's nuts. When you look at what he has to deal with today's environment of free agency and the salary cap that all these other guys of the past didn't have to, Vince Lombardi, Chuck Noll, Bill Walsh, what have you. The expansion of the league to 32 teams, which has weakened the overall talent pool, so meaning that not only can you not stockpile as many great players, there just aren't as many great players to go around for each team. So it really prioritizes coaching these guys up and getting the most out of them. Now, I know some people will talk about his legacy in other ways with Spygate and Deflategate and some of the other crap over the years, and it is a part of the legacy. But let's face it, you can't tell me that other coaches throughout the years didn't find ways to cheat or get strategic advances. You know, the Steelers back in the day, the freaking hash marks were frozen during the Immaculate Reception game. You know, from hash mark to sidelines on both sides, where the Raiders were very much a speed team on the outside with Branch and Bolitnikov. Oh, magically, that hash mark to sideline area is frozen, according to a lot of the Raiders players. I believe it. You know, Bolitnikov wearing his stickum over the years, and all the other players that did too, and all the other things these guys did to cheat. You know, don't tell me that cheating is a new thing, and it's not solely exclusively a Patriot brand or Bill Belichick entity by any stretch of the imagination. You talk about the way he conducts himself and carries himself. He's not the most media friendly. Who gives a fuck? A lot of the best coaches of all time haven't been very media friendly. They've been kind of surly sorts and personalities, and Bill Belichick is one of them. Some may talk about, which is a legitimate question, is that the Bill Belichick coaching tree is not exactly the best. A lot of guys have went out from under his wing and gotten on their own, and they've kind of fallen flat on their face. The Manginis of the world, the Josh McDaniels, the Romeo Crennels. And there's something to be said about that. But at the same point in time, you know, these could be guys that weren't ready. These could be guys that went to bad organizations that were hiring new coaches for a reason. They could have went into bad situations. Those are a lot of things and a lot of factors that, frankly, are out of Bill Belichick's control. What is ultimately in his control, above all else, and what is most important, is the product on the field and the production and performance on the football field. And nobody ever, as a head coach, has been more productive over a longer period of time than Bill Belichick has. 13 seasons of 10-plus wins, a 22-9 career playoff record, 6 Super Bowl appearances, 4 Super Bowl trophies. And when you look back at the teams of the past and you look at Lombardi's Packers and all the Hall of Famers from Bart Starr to Taylor to Hornig to Forrest Gregg to Willie Wood, you know, to Herb Adderley and Nitschke and Robinson and Davis and so on. Who's he had? Guys here and there. Brady, you know, maybe Gronk someday's a Hall of Famer. He's had other really good players over the years, the Richard Seymours of the world, the Ty Laws of the world, Willie McGinnis of the world. But they haven't exactly been a Hall of Fame football player factory. Bill Belichick finds a way to put guys in positions to succeed and make them be better than who they actually are. See Malcolm Butler, the Super Bowl hero from a couple of years ago, as a perfect example of that. Guys that aren't actually that talented, but he finds guys that carry certain traits and characteristics, and he finds a way to utilize them to get the most out of them. Bill Belichick deserves respect and all the credit in the world for what he's done. Like, people talk about how he's the Greg Popovich of the National Football League. Newsflash, Greg Popovich should aspire to be the Bill Belichick of the NBA. While you say Popovich has 5 rings, that's true. Belichick's teams have been, I think, even better over a longer period of time, more consistently. I think he's the dude. It's tougher for him to do what he does in the NFL as opposed to Popovich and what his Spurs and the great things they have done at the NBA. Bill Belichick, is the greatest NFL coach of all time, period. And soon enough, he'll have his bust in Canton, and everybody's just going to have to accept this fact because it is fact.